In a small, quiet town surrounded by rolling hills and endless fields of golden wheat, there lived a young woman named Emily Carter. Her life was simple but meaningful, shaped by the hard work and sacrifices of her parents, who were farmers. Every day, they toiled under the blazing sun, planting seeds, nurturing crops, and harvesting the fruits of their labor. It wasn't an easy life. There were early mornings, late nights, and countless challenges, but it taught Emily values that would stay with her forever: resilience, humility, and determination. Emily grew up watching her parents struggle to make ends meet. They didn't have much, but what they lacked in material wealth, they made up for in love and wisdom. From a young age, Emily learned how to care for animals, tend to crops, and fix broken fences. She also discovered the beauty of nature, the way the wind rustled through the cornfields, the smell of fresh soil after rain, and the satisfaction of seeing plants grow from tiny seeds into towering stalks. Life on the farm was tough, but it was also rewarding, and Emily loved every moment of it. However, as she grew older, Emily began to dream of something more. While her parents were content with their lives on the farm, she yearned to explore the world beyond the horizon. She wanted to break free from the limitations of rural living and create opportunities for herself that her family had never imagined possible. Her parents encouraged her dreams, reminding her that education was the key to unlocking new possibilities. "You can go as far as your mind will take you," her father often said, his voice filled with pride and hope. Determined to succeed, Emily threw herself into her studies. She attended the local high school, where she excelled academically despite facing challenges. Many of her classmates came from wealthier families and sometimes teased her for being different. They laughed at her accent, which carried traces of her rural upbringing, and mocked her hand-me-down clothes. But Emily refused to let their words bring her down. Instead, she used their taunts as fuel to push harder. She studied late into the night, determined to prove that where you come from doesn't define where you can go. Her efforts paid off when she earned a scholarship to a prestigious university in the city. It was a dream come true, but leaving home wasn't easy. Saying goodbye to her parents and the only life she had ever known brought tears to her eyes. Still, she reminded herself why she was doing this: to build a better future not just for herself but for her family too. As she boarded the bus to the city, clutching a suitcase packed with her belongings, she felt a mix of excitement and fear. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to face whatever came her way. Life in the city was a stark contrast to the peaceful countryside she had left behind. Towering buildings replaced open fields, and the constant hum of traffic drowned out the chirping of birds. At first, Emily felt overwhelmed. Everything moved so fast, and everyone seemed so polished and confident. In classrooms filled with students from privileged backgrounds, she often felt like an outsider. Her professors spoke in terms she didn't always understand, and her classmates talked about vacations abroad and expensive gadgets she could barely afford. Yet, Emily refused to let imposter syndrome get the best of her. She reminded herself daily that she belonged there just as much as anyone else. To support herself while studying, Emily took on part-time jobs, working as a waitress, babysitter, and even cleaning offices during the weekends. These experiences taught her valuable lessons about responsibility and perseverance. They also gave her a glimpse into the lives of people from all walks of life, broadening her perspective and deepening her empathy. Through it all, she remained focused on her goal: graduating with honors and finding a career that would allow her to give back to her community. During her final year at university, Emily decided to pursue a degree in business management, hoping to combine her practical knowledge of farming with modern strategies to help struggling agricultural communities. She wrote papers on sustainable farming practices, presented innovative ideas to her professors, and participated in internships that exposed her to the corporate world. Despite occasional setbacks, she kept pushing forward, driven by the belief that her unique background could be an asset rather than a liability. As graduation approached, Emily faced a daunting question: what next? She knew she wanted to work in agriculture, but breaking into the industry without connections or experience felt nearly impossible. Determined to try, She applied to dozens of companies, tailoring each application to showcase her passion and potential. After weeks of waiting, she finally received an invitation for an interview with AgriNova Global, one of the largest agricultural conglomerates in the country. The news thrilled her. It was a chance to step into the big leagues and make a real difference. Preparation became her top priority. Emily spent hours researching the company, practicing answers to common interview questions, and rehearsing her responses until she felt confident. She borrowed a suit from her aunt, ensuring it fit perfectly, and practiced walking in heels for the first time. On the morning of the interview, she woke up before dawn, nerves fluttering in her stomach. As she looked in the mirror, she whispered words of encouragement to herself. "You've got this," she said firmly. "You're smart, capable, and worthy." Little did Emily know, this interview would change her life in ways she couldn't possibly predict. For now, though, she focused on putting one foot in front of the other, determined to seize the opportunity fate had handed her. The day of the interview arrived, and Emily stood outside the towering glass building of AgriNova Global, her heart pounding like a drum. The skyscraper loomed above her, its shiny surface reflecting the morning sun in dazzling beams. She adjusted her borrowed suit one last time, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The lobby was bustling with people, executives in sharp suits, assistants rushing around with folders, and security guards standing tall near polished marble columns. To Emily, it felt like stepping into another world, one far removed from the quiet simplicity of her family's farm. She approached the reception desk, where a polite but hurried woman directed her to the 15th floor. As the elevator climbed higher, Emily's nerves tightened. Her reflection in the mirrored wall showed a young woman trying her best to look confident, though her hands trembled slightly. When the doors opened, she was greeted by a sleek hallway lined with framed awards and certificates. A secretary ushered her into a spacious boardroom, where a panel of 5 executives sat waiting, their expressions unreadable. "Good morning, Miss Carter," said the man at the center of the table, his tone professional but distant. He introduced himself as Mr. Harold Klein, the head of human resources, and gestured for Emily to take a seat. The other members of the panel nodded curtly, their eyes scanning her resume with skeptical glances. Emily forced a smile and sat down, clutching her folder tightly to steady her shaking hands. The questions began almost immediately. At first, they were standard. "Tell us about yourself." "Why do you want to work at AgriNova?" Emily answered as confidently as she could, sharing her passion for agriculture and her desire to bridge the gap between rural farmers and the corporate world. But as the interview progressed, the tone shifted. The panel started asking more technical questions, ones that tested her knowledge of industry jargon, financial models, and global market trends. Emily did her best to respond, drawing on what she had learned during her studies and internships, but she could sense their growing skepticism. Then came the moment that made her stomach drop. One of the interviewers, a sharply dressed woman, with an icy demeanor, leaned forward and asked, "You mentioned in your application that you grew up on a farm. How does growing tomatoes in your backyard qualify as industry experience?" Her voice carried a hint of mockery, and a few of the others exchanged smirks. The room seemed to shrink around Emily as all eyes turned to her. She felt the heat rise to her cheeks, embarrassment washing over her like a wave. For a brief second, Emily considered shrinking back into her chair, letting their judgment silence her. But then she remembered why she was there. Not just for herself, but for the countless farmers like her parents who worked tirelessly without recognition or support. Summoning every ounce of courage, she straightened her posture and looked the woman directly in the eye. "I may not have worked in a corporate office before," Emily began, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "But I've spent my entire life understanding the foundation of this industry, the soil, the seeds, the hardworking people who feed the world. My family's farm taught me the value of sustainability, resourcefulness, and resilience. We didn't just grow crops. We nurtured ecosystems, managed risks, and adapted to challenges year after year. If anything, that's the most valuable kind of experience. It's real, it's hands-on, and it's rooted in the truth of what farming truly means." Her words hung in the air, met with a mix of reactions. Some members of the panel raised their eyebrows, clearly unimpressed. Others scribbled notes, their expressions neutral. The woman who had mocked her rolled her eyes slightly, muttering under her breath, "Farm lessons won't cut it here." Emily's heart sank, but she refused to let them see her falter. She continued answering their questions with determination, even when they probed further into areas where she lacked formal expertise. As the interview dragged on, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was fighting a losing battle. These executives didn't seem interested in hearing about her values or vision. They wanted someone polished, someone who fit neatly into their idea of success. By the time the session ended, Emily felt drained, her confidence battered but not broken. She thanked the panel politely and walked out of the room, her mind racing with doubts. Had she said enough? Would they see past her humble beginnings and recognize her potential? Unbeknownst to Emily, however, something remarkable was happening behind the scenes. Unknown to her, Richard Langley, the CEO of AgriNova Global, had been observing the interview through a two-way mirror. A tall, distinguished man in his late 50s, Richard had built his career on innovation and integrity. He had started as a farmhand himself, working long hours in the fields before climbing the ranks through sheer grit and determination. Over the years, he had grown disillusioned with the corporate culture that prioritized profit over purpose, and he often lamented how disconnected companies like AgriNova had become from the very communities they served. When Richard heard the mocking comment about Emily's backyard tomatoes, he felt a surge of anger and nostalgia. He remembered the days when he too had been dismissed for his lack of polish, his calloused hands marking him as different from the suited professionals in boardrooms. Watching Emily defend herself with quiet dignity stirred something deep within him. Here was a young woman who embodied everything he believed in: authenticity, perseverance, and a genuine connection to the land and its people. Richard decided to act. Leaving his observation post, he entered the boardroom just as the panel was concluding their discussion. The executives looked up in surprise, unsure why the CEO had interrupted. Without hesitation, Richard addressed Emily directly. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice calm but commanding, "I apologize for how you've been treated today. Your perspective is exactly what this company needs." The room fell silent, jaws dropping as Richard turned to the panel. "If anyone here thinks we can solve the challenges facing agriculture without listening to voices like hers, then we're doomed to fail." Emily blinked in disbelief, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Was this really happening? Before she could process what was unfolding, Richard extended his hand and invited her to join him for a private meeting upstairs. The stunned executives watched in silence as Emily followed him out of the room, leaving behind a scene of shock and confusion. For Emily, the elevator ride to the executive suite felt surreal. Her mind raced with questions. Why had the CEO intervened? What did he want from her? And most importantly, could she trust that this wasn't some cruel twist of fate? As they stepped into his office, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking view of the city, Richard gestured for her to sit. For the first time that day, Emily allowed herself to relax slightly, sensing that she was in the presence of someone who truly understood her journey. What Richard said next would change her life forever. As Emily sat across from Richard Langley in his executive suite, she couldn't help but feel a mix of awe and disbelief. The room itself was impressive, walls adorned with awards, shelves lined with books on leadership and agriculture, and a massive window that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. Yet it wasn't the opulence that struck her most. It was the warmth in Richard's demeanor. Unlike the cold professionalism she had encountered earlier, he exuded kindness and sincerity, making her feel like she belonged. Richard began by sharing a bit about himself, almost as if to bridge the gap between them. "You remind me of myself when I was your age," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I started out working in the fields, hands caked with dirt, dreaming of something bigger. But no matter how far I climbed, I never forgot where I came from or the lessons I learned along the way. He paused, studying Emily intently, as though searching for a spark he already knew existed within her. That's why I intervened today. You have a fire in you, Miss Carter, a passion that's rare in this industry. Emily listened intently, her heart swelling with both pride and uncertainty. She appreciated his words, but part of her still wondered if she truly deserved such praise. Thank you, Mr. Langley, she replied hesitantly, but I'm not sure I'm ready for whatever this is. Those executives downstairs clearly didn't think I was qualified. Richard chuckled softly, shaking his head. Let me tell you something, Emily. Qualifications are important, yes, but they're not everything. What matters most is vision, the ability to see beyond the numbers and understand the human element behind our work. And from what I saw today, you have that in spades. He went on to explain his concerns about Agrinova Global. Despite its success, the company had grown disconnected from the very people it depended on, farmers. Over the years, profit margins had taken precedence over sustainability, and relationships with rural communities had frayed. Richard believed it was time for a change, a bold step toward rebuilding trust and empowering those who formed the backbone of the agricultural industry. That's where you come in, he said, his tone growing more serious. I want to create a new division within Agrinova, one focused solely on sustainable farming practices and farmer advocacy. It will require someone with fresh ideas, unshakable determination, and a deep understanding of what it means to live and work on the land. Someone like you. Emily's eyes widened. Me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. But I've only just graduated. I don't have any corporate experience. And yet, Richard countered, you've spent your entire life immersed in the very world we're trying to serve. You know the struggles farmers face because you've lived them. You've seen firsthand how unsustainable practices can harm communities and ecosystems. That's worth more than any MBA or polished resume. What you lack in traditional experience, you make up for in authenticity. And that's exactly what we need right now. His words resonated deeply with Emily, stirring emotions she hadn't fully processed until that moment. For years, she had dreamed of finding a way to give back to the farming community. Not just her own family, but all the hardworking men and women who fed the nation. Here was an opportunity to do just that, on a scale she had never imagined possible. Still, the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. Could she really step into such a pivotal role? Sensing her hesitation, Richard leaned forward, his gaze steady. I won't sugarcoat it, Emily. This won't be easy. There will be resistance, from executives who don't share your vision, from farmers who may doubt your intentions, and even from yourself when things get tough. But I believe in you. More importantly, I believe in what you represent: hope, resilience, and a commitment to doing what's right, even when it's hard. He then outlined his proposal. Emily would become the chairwoman of the newly formed division, tasked with spearheading initiatives aimed at supporting small-scale farmers, promoting eco-friendly practices, and fostering collaboration between rural communities and Agrinova Global. She would report directly to him, bypassing much of the red tape that often stifled innovation within large corporations. In essence, she would have the freedom to shape the future of the company, and perhaps the industry as a whole. The offer left Emily speechless. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined being entrusted with such a monumental responsibility. Her mind raced with questions. Could she handle the pressure? Would others respect her authority? And how would her parents react when they heard the news? Yet amidst the uncertainty, one thing was clear. This was a chance to make a real difference, not just for herself but for countless others. After a long pause, Emily finally spoke. Mr. Langley, I'm honored. Truly I am. But I need to be honest. I'm scared. Scared of failing, of letting people down, of proving everyone who doubted me right. Richard smiled gently, nodding as though he had expected this response. Fear is natural, Emily. It means you care. But let me ask you this. Do you believe in your mission? Do you believe in the change you want to create? She thought for a moment, reflecting on everything she had fought for. The late nights, studying. The sacrifices her parents had made. the dream she carried in her heart. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes," she said firmly. "I believe in it completely." "Then that's all that matters," Richard replied. "The rest will fall into place as you go. Trust yourself, Emily. You're stronger than you think." With those words, Richard extended his hand across the desk. Emily hesitated only briefly before reaching out to shake it, sealing the agreement that would alter the course of her life forever. As she stood to leave, Richard added one final piece of advice. "Remember, leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and listening to those around you. Stay true to who you are, and you'll inspire others to do the same." Walking out of the executive suite, Emily felt a strange mix of emotions: excitement, fear, and an overwhelming sense of purpose. She glanced down at the bustling streets below, marveling at how much her world had changed in a single day. Just hours ago, she had been mocked and dismissed. Now, she was being handed the reins to lead a movement she deeply cared about. As she stepped into the elevator, Emily allowed herself a small smile. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it head-on. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The days following her meeting with Richard Langley were a whirlwind for Emily. She returned home to her family's farm, eager to share the news of her new role as chairwoman of AgriNova Global's Sustainable Farming Division. Her parents listened, in awe as she explained the magnitude of the opportunity before her. At first, they struggled to grasp how their daughter, a girl who had once helped them milk cows and mend fences, was now being entrusted with leading a major initiative within one of the largest agricultural companies in the world. But as Emily spoke passionately about her vision for change, their initial disbelief turned into pride. "They're lucky to have you," her father said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've always had a way of seeing things others miss." Her mother hugged her tightly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Just remember where you came from," she whispered. "That's your strength." With her family's blessing, Emily dove headfirst into her new responsibilities. The first challenge was assembling a team to support her efforts. Knowing that trust would be key, she sought out individuals who shared her values, people with diverse backgrounds but a common commitment to sustainability and community empowerment. Among them were agronomists, economists, environmental scientists, and even former farmers who understood the struggles of rural life firsthand. Together they formed a tight-knit group united by a shared mission: to transform AgriNova Global from the inside out. However, not everyone welcomed Emily's appointment with open arms. Back at the company headquarters, whispers of discontent spread like wildfire among senior executives. Many resented the idea of taking orders from someone so young and inexperienced. Some openly questioned Richard Langley's decision, accusing him of prioritizing sentimentality over competence. One executive in particular, a man named Gregory Henshaw, made no secret of his disdain. During a tense board meeting, he scoffed, "What does a farmer's daughter know about running a multi-million-dollar division? This is a recipe for disaster." Emily heard these criticisms through the grapevine, but she refused to let them shake her resolve. Instead, she channeled her energy into proving her detractors wrong. Her first order of business was to organize a series of town hall meetings with farmers across the country. These gatherings weren't just about gathering data, they were about building relationships. Emily wanted to hear directly from the people whose lives her work would impact. Traveling from state to state, she sat down with farmers of all ages and backgrounds, listening intently as they shared their stories, frustrations, and hopes for the future. One such meeting took place in a small Midwestern town. The room was packed with weathered faces, many lined with years of hard labor under the sun. As Emily stood at the front, some attendees eyed her skeptically. "What's a city girl going to tell us about farming?" muttered an older man in the back row. Undeterred, Emily introduced herself simply as a farmer's daughter and began speaking about her upbringing. She talked about waking up before dawn to help her parents tend to livestock, learning to read the signs of changing weather, and understanding the delicate balance between nature and nurture. By the time she finished, the skepticism in the room had softened into curiosity. But it wasn't just talk. Emily backed her words with action. She launched pilot programs aimed at addressing some of the most pressing issues facing farmers today. One initiative focused on helping struggling farms transition to organic practices, providing them with training, resources, and access to fairer markets. Another program introduced cutting-edge technology designed to improve crop yields while reducing environmental impact. Farmers could use smartphone apps to monitor soil health, predict pest infestations, or optimize irrigation schedules, all tools that had previously been out of reach due to cost or complexity. Progress was slow at first. Some farmers were hesitant to adopt new methods, fearing the risks involved. Others doubted whether AgriNova Global truly had their best interests at heart. But Emily remained patient, visiting farms personally to demonstrate the benefits of the programs. She rolled up her sleeves alongside workers, showing them how to operate the new equipment and answering their questions with honesty and humility. Slowly but surely, trust began to build. The turning point came when a struggling corn farm in Iowa became one of the first to fully embrace Emily's initiatives. With guidance from her team, the farm implemented sustainable practices and adopted the latest technology. Within a year, they reported record yields and significant reductions in water usage. Word of their success spread quickly, inspiring other farmers to give the programs a try. Soon, testimonials poured in from across the country, praising Emily and her team for making a tangible difference. Back at AgriNova Global, attitudes began to shift. Even those who had initially opposed Emily started to recognize her contributions. Gregory Henshaw, once her harshest critic, found himself reluctantly impressed after attending a presentation where she showcased the division's achievements. "I still think this is risky," he admitted grudgingly during a follow-up meeting. "But I can't deny the results speak for themselves." As the months passed, Emily's leadership style earned widespread admiration. Unlike many corporate executives, she led with empathy and transparency. She encouraged open dialogue, welcoming feedback, even criticism, from both her team and the communities they served. When challenges arose, she faced them head-on, never shying away from accountability. Her authenticity resonated deeply with those around her, earning her the loyalty and respect of colleagues and partners alike. By the end of her first year as chairwoman, Emily had transformed not only AgriNova Global's approach to agriculture, but also its reputation. The company was hailed as a pioneer in sustainable farming practices, receiving accolades from industry leaders and environmental advocates alike. Yet for Emily, the greatest reward wasn't the recognition. It was the knowledge that she was making a real difference. Every thriving farm, every smiling farmer, and every acre of healthy soil reminded her why she had taken on this role in the first place. Looking back, Emily realized how far she had come since that fateful interview. From being mocked and dismissed to earning the trust of an entire industry, her journey had been anything but easy, but through perseverance, passion, and unwavering belief in her mission, she had proven that true leadership isn't defined by titles or degrees. It's about staying true to your values and using your unique perspective to create positive change. As she prepared for the next phase of her work, Emily couldn't help but smile. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but she was ready. After all, she had already shown the world, and herself, that even the humblest beginnings could lead to extraordinary heights. As Emily settled into her role as chairwoman, she began to realize that success wasn't just about implementing programs or achieving measurable results. It was also about inspiring others to believe in the possibility of change. Her journey had already shown her that transformation often started with small steps, but those steps could ripple outward, touching lives far beyond what she initially imagined. With this mindset, Emily set her sights on expanding her impact globally, determined to bring sustainable farming practices and farmer empowerment to communities around the world. Her first international project took her to Kenya, where farmers were struggling with droughts and outdated techniques that left their soil barren and unproductive. When Emily arrived, she was struck by both the beauty and the hardship of the region. The vast savanna stretched endlessly under a blazing sun, dotted with patches of green where crops clung to life despite the odds. Families worked tirelessly, yet hunger remained a constant threat. It was a stark reminder of why her work mattered so deeply. Emily spent weeks traveling from village to village, meeting with local leaders and listening to their stories. She quickly learned that solutions couldn't be imposed. They had to grow organically from within the community. Working alongside Kenyan agronomists and activists, Emily helped design programs tailored specifically to the region's needs. They introduced drought-resistant seeds, taught water conservation methods, and provided training on crop rotation to restore soil fertility. To ensure long-term sustainability, they partnered with local cooperatives, giving farmers ownership over the initiatives. The results were transformative. Within months, fields that had once lain fallow began producing healthy crops again. Families who had gone hungry for years now had enough food to eat, and even surplus to sell at local markets. One elderly farmer named Mathoni approached Emily during a follow-up visit, tears streaming down her face. "You've given us hope," she said, clutching Emily's hands tightly. "Not just for today, but for our children's future." Word of these successes spread rapidly, drawing attention not only from neighboring countries but also from global organizations focused on agriculture and climate resilience. Emily found herself invited to speak at conferences and summits, sharing her experiences and advocating for policies that supported small-scale farmers. At one such event in Geneva, she delivered a keynote speech that left the audience spellbound. Standing on stage, dressed in her signature modest attire, she spoke not just as a business leader but as someone who had lived the struggles she described. "Too often," she began, her voice steady and clear, "we treat farmers as statistics, numbers, on a spreadsheet or cogs in a machine. But let me tell you something. Farmers are the heartbeat of humanity. Without them, we wouldn't eat. Without them, we wouldn't survive. And yet, they're among the most marginalized people in the world, working harder than anyone else for less reward. That has to change." Her words resonated deeply, earning her a standing ovation. Journalists clamored to interview her, eager to learn more about the woman who had risen from humble beginnings to become a champion of the underserved. Yet despite the growing fame, Emily remained grounded. She knew that recognition was fleeting, unless it translated into action. Every accolade she received became fuel for her mission, motivating her to push even harder. Back at AgriNova Global, Emily continued to challenge the status quo. She spearheaded efforts to overhaul the company's supply chain, ensuring fairer pricing models for farmers and reducing waste throughout the production process. She also launched an educational initiative aimed at bridging the gap between rural and urban communities. Through workshops, online courses, and interactive forums, she sought to educate consumers about the importance of supporting ethical farming practices. "When you buy produce," she often said, "you're not just buying food, you're investing in someone's livelihood." Her leadership style evolved as well. While she had always prioritized empathy and collaboration, she now embraced boldness, unafraid to take risks when necessary. When critics argued that certain projects were too ambitious or costly, Emily stood firm, reminding them that innovation required courage. "If we only do what's safe," she told her team during a strategy meeting, "we'll never achieve real progress. We have to be willing to fail if we want to succeed." This philosophy paid off in unexpected ways. One of her riskiest ventures involved partnering with tech companies to develop affordable, solar-powered irrigation systems for remote areas. Initially met with skepticism, even within her own division, the project eventually proved to be a game-changer. Farmers who had relied on unpredictable rainfall could now water their fields consistently, leading to higher yields and improved incomes. The technology caught the attention of governments and NGOs worldwide, sparking partnerships that amplified its reach exponentially. Despite her many accomplishments, Emily faced moments of doubt. There were days when the weight of responsibility felt crushing, when setbacks tested her patience and resolve. Once, during a particularly grueling period, she confided in Richard Langley, who had become both a mentor and a friend. I feel like I'm carrying the hopes of millions on my shoulders, she admitted. What if I let them down? Richard smiled gently, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You won't, he said, because you're not doing this alone. You've built a team of incredible people who believe in your vision. And remember, Emily, change doesn't happen overnight. All you can do is give your best every single day. That's enough. His words reminded her of the lessons she had learned growing up on her family's farm. Just as crops grew gradually, nurtured by sunlight and rain, so too did progress. Each step forward, no matter how small, mattered. As time went on, Emily's influence extended beyond agriculture. She became a symbol of hope and perseverance, proof that anyone, regardless of background, could rise above adversity and make a difference. Schools began teaching her story in classrooms, inspiring young students to dream big and stay true to themselves. Women's groups celebrated her as a trailblazer, pointing to her achievements as evidence that gender should never limit ambition. Even politicians cited her work as a model for addressing economic inequality and environmental challenges. Through it all, Emily stayed connected to her roots. Whenever possible, she returned to her family's farm, finding solace in the familiar rhythms of rural life. Walking through the fields with her parents, she marveled at how much had changed, and yet how much remained the same. You know, her father said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, you've done something amazing. But don't forget, sweetheart, success isn't about titles or awards. It's about knowing you've made the world a little better. His words brought tears to her eyes, grounding her once again in the values that had guided her journey. Success, she realized, wasn't defined by external validation. It was measured by the lives touched and the legacy left behind. And in that moment, surrounded by the land she loved and the people who believed in her, Emily knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. With renewed determination, she looked ahead to the future, ready to tackle whatever challenges lay before her. The road would undoubtedly be long and winding, but Emily Carter, the farmer's daughter who had once been mocked in a boardroom, was no stranger to overcoming obstacles. Armed with grit, compassion, and an unshakable belief in the power of change, she marched forward, leaving footprints of hope wherever she went. Years passed, and Emily Carter's name became synonymous with transformation, not just in agriculture, but in the broader narrative of resilience and empowerment. Her journey from a small-town farm girl to a global leader had inspired millions, proving that authenticity and determination could break barriers once thought insurmountable. Yet for Emily, the true measure of her success wasn't fame or accolades. It was the tangible impact she had made on the lives of farmers, families, and communities around the world. By the 5th year of her tenure as chairwoman, Agrinova Global had undergone a complete cultural shift. What was once a profit-driven conglomerate now stood as a beacon of ethical leadership, prioritizing sustainability, fairness, and innovation. Under Emily's guidance, the company launched groundbreaking initiatives that redefined industry standards. One such program, called Roots and Wings, provided financial grants and mentorship to young entrepreneurs in rural areas, helping them launch agri-tech startups aimed at solving local challenges. Another initiative, Soil to Table, connected urban consumers directly with farmers, fostering transparency and trust while ensuring fair compensation for producers. The ripple effects of these efforts reached far beyond Agrinova's operations. Governments adopted similar models, implementing policies that supported small-scale farmers and incentivized eco-friendly practices. International organizations hailed Emily's work as a blueprint for addressing food security and climate change. She traveled extensively, sharing her story and advocating for systemic changes that would uplift marginalized voices. Whether speaking at the United Nations or visiting remote villages in Southeast Asia, Emily carried herself with humility, always emphasizing that her achievements were the result of collective effort. Her influence extended into unexpected arenas as well. Schools across the globe began incorporating lessons about sustainable farming and social responsibility into their curricula, using Emily's life as a case study in perseverance and vision. Women's groups celebrated her as a role model, highlighting how she had shattered stereotypes and paved the way for future generations of female leaders. Even Hollywood took notice, with filmmakers approaching her to adapt her story into a biopic, an offer she politely declined, insisting that her focus remain on the work ahead rather than personal glory. Despite her global prominence, Emily never lost sight of her roots. Every few months she returned to her family's farm, finding comfort in the simplicity of country life. These visits reminded her why she had embarked on this journey in the first place: to honor the sacrifices her parents had made and to give back to the community that shaped her. During one particularly memorable trip, she organized a harvest festival, inviting neighboring farmers and their families to celebrate together. As they shared meals, laughter, and stories under the stars, Emily felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This, she realized, was what mattered most: the connections forged, the bonds strengthened, the joy shared. But even as she basked in the successes of her career, Emily faced new challenges. The agricultural landscape continued to evolve, bringing fresh obstacles like climate crises, geopolitical tensions, and technological disruptions. Farmers who had embraced her programs suddenly found themselves grappling with unprecedented droughts or market fluctuations. Critics emerged, questioning whether her methods could withstand the test of time. Some accused her of being overly idealistic, arguing that profitability should still take precedence over sustainability. Emily listened to these concerns with an open mind, refusing to dismiss them outright. Instead, she used them as opportunities to refine her approach. She convened roundtable discussions with experts from diverse fields, scientists, economists, policymakers, and farmers, to brainstorm solutions. Together, they developed adaptive strategies that balanced environmental stewardship with economic viability. For example, when extreme weather patterns threatened crops in South America, Emily's team introduced early warning systems powered by satellite data, enabling farmers to prepare for disasters before they struck. When trade disputes disrupted supply chains in Europe, she facilitated partnerships between local cooperatives and regional distributors, minimizing losses and strengthening community ties. Through it all, Emily remained steadfast in her belief that collaboration was key. "No one person has all the answers," she often said during interviews. "Progress happens when we listen to each other, share our knowledge, and work together toward a common goal." This philosophy resonated deeply, earning her allies in unlikely places. Former skeptics within AgriNova Global became vocal supporters, praising her ability to unite people across divides. Even Gregory Henshaw, who had once dismissed her as inexperienced, admitted in a company-wide address, "Emily Carter has taught us that leadership isn't about ego, it's about service, and she serves with heart." As the years rolled on, Emily began thinking about her legacy. While she had no plans to step away anytime soon, she recognized the importance of nurturing the next generation of leaders. To that end, she established the Carter-Langley Fellowship, a scholarship program designed to support students from rural backgrounds pursuing careers in agriculture, business, or environmental science. Recipients weren't chosen solely based on academic merit. Instead, emphasis was placed on character, creativity, and commitment to making a difference. "These are the qualities that truly matter," Emily explained at the fellowship's inaugural ceremony. "They're what will drive real change in the years to come." Her decision to partner Richard Langley's name with hers in the fellowship title spoke volumes about the bond they had formed over the years. Richard, now retired, often joined Emily at public events, offering wisdom and encouragement whenever needed. Their friendship served as a testament to the power of mentorship and to the idea that greatness is rarely achieved alone. In her final years as chairwoman, Emily reflected on the twists and turns of her journey. From the humiliation of that fateful interview to the triumphs of transforming an entire industry, every moment had shaped her into the person she was today. She thought about the countless individuals who had believed in her: her parents, Richard, her team, and the farmers whose courage and resilience inspired her daily. She also thought about those who had doubted her, realizing that their skepticism had fueled her determination to prove them wrong. One evening, as she sat on the porch of her childhood home, watching fireflies dance in the twilight, Emily allowed herself a rare moment of introspection. She thought about the little girl she had once been, the one who dreamed of escaping the confines of rural life yet cherished its lessons above all else. That girl, she realized, was still very much alive within her, guiding her choices and grounding her in what mattered most. "I did it," she whispered softly, not out of pride but out of gratitude. Not because I was special, but because I refused to give up. In that quiet acknowledgement lay the essence of her story. Success wasn't reserved for the privileged or the polished. It belonged to anyone willing to fight for it with heart and integrity. When Emily finally stepped down as chairwoman, the world took notice. Tributes poured in from every corner. Farmers, executives, activists, and ordinary citizens alike expressing their admiration and thanks. But for Emily, the greatest reward was knowing that her work would endure long after she left the spotlight. She had planted seeds, both literal and metaphorical, that would continue to grow and flourish, nourishing future generations. In retirement, Emily dedicated herself to writing, penning a memoir titled From Fields to Futures, A Journey of Hope, and the book became an instant bestseller, beloved not just for its inspiring narrative but for its practical advice on leadership, sustainability, and resilience. In its final chapter, she wrote, "Life is like farming. You sow, you nurture, and sometimes you face storms that threaten to destroy everything you've built. But if you persevere, if you stay true to your values and keep believing in the possibility of growth, miracles can happen. Remember, the smallest seed holds the promise of the tallest tree. So plant boldly, water faithfully, and trust in the beauty of the process." Emily Carter's legacy lived on, not just in the pages of history books or the halls of prestigious institutions, but in the hearts of those whose lives she touched. From the bustling streets of major cities to the quiet corners of distant farms, her story served as a reminder that greatness isn't defined by where you start, but by the courage to rise above limitations and create something meaningful. And so the farmer's daughter, who had once been mocked in a boardroom, rose to become a legend, proving that authenticity always finds its place in the sun.